Today's video is about how to create effective accountability support structures. I'm Mike Stokes, and this is Wild Alive Coaching. So, if you're anything like me, which I don't think you'd be watching this if you were nothing like me, or you're going to click off right now, you're into evolving and growing and becoming a better you. And I did that for many years inside of groups, as well as for reading many books and trying to implement the ideas in those books. Just a note, this video is going to be kind of short and hopefully lucid. I've been in the sauna for quite a long time now, and so I'm a little wiped out, but I really wanted to get these thoughts down before they left me. It's really important to record your thoughts if you want to do any type of creative work when they arise, because they transform and leave. Sometimes they don't come back. So how to create an effective accountability structure. I used many groups. So you can either join a group that has an effective accountability structure, or you can create your own one. I found over many years with the groups that I joined that there were certain elements in their accountability structure that didn't work for me or were ineffective. One of the things that I found was that most groups are driving their own agenda or driving their own culture. So if you have a profit-driven organization that's setting up coaching on accountability structures, they're doing that for their own self-interest financially. And usually that gets, that gets somewhat mixed up in what's best for you. It just can't be, it can't not be done. The incentives are too large to push your personal agenda. And if that, sometimes your goals in your life will align with that, and sometimes they won't. So that's one thing to watch out for if you're going to join an accountability structure. Let me just tell you the basics before I go into the do's and don'ts. One is your accountability structure has to have both a positive and a negative feedback loop when you don't fulfill on your commitments. And two is the group has to have a vested interest in your success. And three, the group has to have some sort of longevity structure built into it. So I'm just going to go into the structure that we created. So we created a men's group, and we chose a men's group because we had relationship issues we wanted to cover and a sense of bonding that we wanted to create that wasn't really existent in our local culture in Northern California. So you can create a women's group, a men's group, any type, a group that mixes, a group that's of any sexual orientation. Orientation doesn't matter. What matters is what's important to you. The key for the accountability structure is that I'm sure many of you have heard of SMART: specific, measurable, actionable, results-oriented, and time-based. So your goals need to be short-term and time and all of those things. And then you have to have a feedback loop that really emotionally hurts if you don't do it, and emotionally rewards if you do. So here's how we created that, and it evolved over years. At first, it didn't work. We created a system in which each one of us who makes whatever goals we want for a 2-week period. We also have a very strong commitment to the longevity of the group, so that everybody's committed for the long term. And if they want to get out, there's a process that they have to go to in order to get out. They don't just leave at any point. So that is critical, that there's longevity. And one of the critical points in having, if you're going to create your own group, is that you have to create value for each individual. Now, everybody's value is going to be a little bit different. Some people, for example, we have a man in our group who values the relationships more than the accountability structures. And all of us value, the rest of us all value both. But he's not really interested in the accountability structures. They just don't really jive with the way he lives his life, which is totally fine. but he still participates in holding the rest of us accountable to what we say we want. So we created some guiding principles. So your group, if you're going to join one, or if you're going to create one, has to have some guiding principles. So our guiding principle is that we, as a group and individually, are committed to the success of each man in the group in the way that they define that. That's one. So everybody's always holding that. Two is that every man in the group is committed to reveal himself in a way that we're committed to know each other deeply. Sorry, not to reveal stuff, but we're committed to know each other deeply. So we're not just sort of floating around the surface. We're really trying to dig in and get to know the ins and outs of each person in our group so that we can support them in the best way that we can. And the last one is that we committed to use accountability as a tool to achieve both of those ends. So, for example, everybody in our group, you got to show up on time, and if you don't show up on time, there's a feedback, for lack of a better term, a consequence, just so that you feel the emotional pain and the waste of time for the others. Other people are sitting around waiting for you to show up because things can't really get going until you're there when that happens. So there'll be two things. One will be we will literally walk through what were the circumstances of the person being late. Then they'll have to do something to hold them accountable. And for us, it's just a feedback loop to clear the integrity, and so that they feel that there's a negative impact on others, and there's a negative impact on the group as a whole, and they feel that in their body. So for us, we're a very physical group that likes to stay fit. We do like a 90-second wall sit with your knees at 90 degrees, which is hard. It's healthy, and it's a little uncomfortable. So that's one thing that we do for using accountability. Now, what that does is that brings up each individual's story about being on time. Some people get overwhelmed. Some people get busy. Some people have sort of blame it on their partner, so their partner's making it so they can't do it. Everybody's got their own little thing. So we work through that, and then everybody knows that there's an expectation that they're going to grow through it the next time. And so the other thing that we do is that we, as a group, agree on the actions that this individual is going to take to be on time next time. So, for example, let's say one guy's always 5 minutes. He's always like squeaking in 30 seconds early, So then we may say well, for the next 2 weeks, you're on probation. You got to be to the meetings 5 minutes early at a minimum, or you're considered late. So each one of us agrees upon that, and we all agree as a group. And sometimes there's debate about what's effective and what's not, and then we come to a consensus. And when we come to a consensus, that's what the person takes on. And sometimes they're unwilling, and then we have to find a new thing that they're willing to take on. We never force anything upon one of the members. There's just agreed upon accountability standards which they agree upon and are held to because they agreed upon it. So that's one thing. So just being on time and showing up to meetings and not, for example, we have a rule that we've created over the last 10 years called sort of no last minute cancels unless it's an emergency or health issue. Those are the two exceptions, because those are reasonable exceptions that happen to everybody from time to time. And even in that case, we've had some guys in the group that really had to look at their health patterns because they would be getting sick a lot and canceling at the last minute. So there wasn't something that was, there was something off in the pattern. That's another thing that you want to have in your accountability groups is you have to have pattern recognition. So the other people in your group need to be on the lookout for when you do something twice, 3 times, 4 times. And if you're breaking a basic agreement to the group, 3, 4 times, or even twice, we've gotten to the point where it's twice, it's becoming a pattern because we're so clear on the basics, and the basics are so simple. Most people underestimate the challenge of just keeping a simple commitment. We have basically a couple of commitments in our group. You show up on time, you don't cancel for no reason, and then whatever goals you make for a 2-week period, you keep them, or you call and renegotiate with your support buddy, who we have a call in between the weeks with your support buddy. But those are very difficult. And that's what's so wonderful about a true support group, is that your unconscious patterns that self-defeat you will reveal themselves if you hold a basic standard of accountability. And it's really great, the idea of making your own goals, because then it's nobody else's idea. You're the one who put yourself in this position, and then you have to deal with whatever it takes to make it happen. So back to the meat of the structure. The meat of the structure is our bi-weekly or bi-monthly, so we meet every 2 weeks, our bi-monthly goal structure. First thing we do is review the last 2 weeks' goals. See who completed, who didn't complete. So whoever didn't complete, everybody else in the group will ask a simple question: what happened? Did you miss your phone call? Did you did you get overwhelmed? Did you get sick? And then the next thing, once we're clear on what happened, then the next question is, how can you succeed next time? And then that person agrees, we all come up with strategies communally, and then that person agrees to implement that for the next week's structure, if they're going to make the same goal, or if it's relevant to being on time or making your support buddy call. So those are things. So, and then when somebody doesn't complete a goal, after those two things, what happened, what are you going to do next time, everybody who was in the group at the last meeting where he declared the goals pays in $1 for every time he failed a goal. So let's say he failed on 5 goals. Everybody would have to put in $5. If he failed on 1 goal, everybody puts in $1. Now, it's not that much money, but it emotionally why am I giving $1 for this? It sort of makes you, as your support person, a little uncomfortable. And that's good. We got to get away from this idea in the personal development world that we never want to be uncomfortable, or we never want to, make anybody else uncomfortable. We have to learn how to use those emotions. There's a great saying that there's no such thing as a negative emotion, just ones that are sort of overindulged in or misapplied. The last part is mine. The first part is the same. So, what's the point? Get back on track here. At the meeting that you declare your goals, everybody else writes them down in their little book or on their phone. So everybody has a physical record of your goals. So there's studies that have been done that shown if people write down their own goals, they're 90% more likely to do them, even if they never look at them again. But we have 5 or 6 people, depending on who's at the meeting, writing down those goals and holding them to those short-term goals. So that makes every man more likely to complete those goals. Another interesting thing that happens in the process when you create an effective goal structure is you start changing your goals. You start making goals that you can accomplish if you're the kind of person who doesn't tend to accomplish your goals. One caveat about that is we've had several men in the group who just make really safe goals, and so we have to encourage them to make stretch goals. If you're familiar with General Electric's training system, they I think invented the SMART, measurable, actionable, result-oriented, and time-bound goals. But they found that some areas of their company were underachieving, so then they had to add stretch goals to that inside of those. So you have a bigger stretch goal, and then your specific measurable goals inside of that. So that's really the gist of the whole structure. The group meets, you decide on your goals, you write them down, everybody writes them down, you do your best to do them, and then so one other piece of that is that we have another commitment, and that is that we have an accountability buddy that is midweek call. So we meet on Mondays, and then midweek call on Monday, and then we meet the next Monday. So that accountability call is a commitment for everybody, regardless of what your goals are. So if you miss your accountability call, I got to pay $1 into the kitty. If you miss it for 2 days, I got to pay $1 into the kitty. And so we've done a lot of work with our guys around scheduling. And reminders. Because a lot of times, they honestly tried and didn't have the capacity in their scheduling or reminder system to make it work. Other times, it's more of an emotionally driven excuse, and we have to work through that. But it always gets sorted out because we do the same process every time, and it evolves. So each time what happened when you missed a goal, how are you going to approach this next time, and then holding each person to the feedback of giving a dollar in when they don't do it. It self-corrects. The system self-corrects because everybody has a vested interest in it. It's kind of like taking the military model minus the violence and the war, where each partner in on the battlefield is accountable for the life of every other man in their group. So it's the same kind of thing, obviously not on such a real life or death level, but we do our best to try to emulate as much of that life or death as we can, because that's what really gets it done. There's two ways to motivate: from inspiration and from fear. But the truth is you got to have a little bit of both. You got to have some accountability. You can't just be constantly striving for inspiration, or once that inspiration fades, you're just going to sink into an ungrounded pit. Again, that's what works for me. I know in my heart that most people are that way. Some people aren't. If you're not that way, then fine. Just keep doing what you're doing, make it work, and succeed. But if you're failing, or if you're not reaching the heights that you want to reach, then I recommend strongly that you put in a new accountability structure that has all these elements. I made a video about good pain and bad pain. I think I'm approaching some bad pain. My heart's starting to get a little over challenged in this hot environment. So I'm going to finish up. In order to create an effective accountability group, there has to be a feedback loop. There have to be other people that feel your pain, that feel the pain when you don't complete your commitments. And there has to be a process in which you work through what broke and the plan that you're going to fix it next time. Another thing which we're working on, which we haven't sorted out all the kinks are, is how to create the short-term 2-week, how to connect the short-term 2-week goal to the month-long, to the quarter-long, to the annual-long goal. Now, we've written those down and created those out, but we're just in the process of figuring out how to actually make those work. So to connect the macro, the meso, and the micro. Hopefully in a few years we'll have all the kinks worked out and I'll be able to make another video about that. But in the beginning you should have at least something written down that says where you want to be in 10 years, and where you want to be at the end of the year, and where you want to be at the end of the month, and where you want to be at the end of 4 months. 4 months, 6 months, doesn't matter. And year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, just break it up. So that's about it. Another word on organized groups: run them through the system. Do other people feel your pain? Do they process where you broke down? Do they actually hold you accountable, or do they just pay lip service to it? So that's what I found in the beginning. In the beginning, we would pay lip service to it, and each one individually, when I missed my goal, I'd give $1. It didn't work. I didn't care. I didn't care that I gave $1. I gave $1 for coffee. But when somebody else pays for you, that hits in the emotion. So you have to drive your motivation through your emotional body. That's the key. Drive it through your emotional body. The easiest way to drive things through your emotional body is to have other people hold you accountable. Whether it's your family, your daughter, your job, your support group, whatever. If you have a structure in place where you letting them down isn't okay with you, you're going to succeed, at least on the level of those commitments. Then you have to organize all of those commitments in a way that actually accomplishes the goal that you want. But it's better to be in action and creating something than have some lofty goal and no structure to complete it. Thanks for watching. I'm Mike Stokes with Wild Alive Coaching. Please subscribe below, and have a great day.